Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into two ancient texts that grapple with a really profound, very human dilemma. Have you ever wondered what actually happens when absolute declarations, like rigid rules, terminal verdicts, or deeply entrenched traditions, collide head-on with raw human vulnerability? Well, that's the exact tension we're unpacking today. We're going to look at two incredible narratives that show us exactly what happens when the letter of the law meets the harsh reality of human suffering. Okay, let's dive into this. It's a question that honestly echoes through history, right? What happens when strict rules clash with human suffering? In the text we're exploring today, we see this really visceral tension between rigid laws, whether they're medical, prophetic, or religious, and divine compassion. I mean, think about it. When someone is starving or literally dying, do the old rules still apply? Let's find out how the source material actually answers this. So we start our journey in the book of Isaiah, chapter 38, with Act 1, the reversal of fate. Here we meet King Hezekiah. Now, this isn't some sprawling story about a vast army or a giant empire. This is a very high-stakes microdrama. Hezekiah is facing a sudden, devastating illness. He's mortally ill. And the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, comes to him and basically delivers a divine eviction notice. Just look at the definitive, brutal nature of this quote from the text. "Put your house in order, for you're about to die, you shall not recover." There's absolutely no ambiguity here. It's a terminal diagnosis delivered straight from a prophet. It is a strict, unyielding decree. The rule is set. Hezekiah's time is up. But how does Hezekiah react to this? Well, he doesn't just accept this mandate. The text tells us he immediately turns his face to the wall and prays. He pleads, "O Lord, remember how faithfully and wholeheartedly I conducted myself in your presence, doing what was pleasing to you." And then the text notes, Hezekiah wept bitterly. This is a moment of raw, desperate whiplash. He is terrified. He's incredibly vulnerable, and he's pleading for his life through his tears, hoping that maybe, just maybe, his past faithfulness might somehow outweigh the absolute decree of his impending death. And right here is where the narrative takes a massive turn. Actually, before Isaiah can even get very far, the word of the Lord comes back to him with a totally new message for Hezekiah. God tells Isaiah, "I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will heal you." I mean, wow, God completely overturns the definitive rule of the terminal diagnosis that he had literally just handed down. Human sorrow and vulnerability prompt an immediate divine reversal. And God doesn't just offer some vague promise about feeling better. He gives him a highly specific extension, 15. God miraculously promises to add exactly 15 years to King Hezekiah's life. This number is such a profound, tangible reversal of fate. It takes the absolute cold certainty of "you shall not recover" and completely overwrites it with a precise, generous decade and a half of new life. But the compassion doesn't even stop at those 15 years. We see a total cascade of divine mercy here. God outlines a whole sequence of promises. First, Hezekiah will be healed so quickly that in just 3 days, he'll be well enough to go up to the temple. And then, God extends this mercy from the personal to the national level. He promises to rescue Hezekiah and the entire city from the hand of the king of Assyria, declaring, "I will be a shield to this city." So Hezekiah's tears didn't just save his own life, they saved his entire kingdom. Now, right in the middle of all this sweeping, miraculous divine intervention, Isaiah issues a really surprising instruction. Step 1, take a poultice of figs. Step 2, apply it to the boil to recover. It's almost funny in its simplicity, isn't it? Amidst changing the fate of nations and adding decades to a life, the prophet prescribes a completely mundane, practical, ancient medical remedy. It just shows us that divine mercy in this text isn't all about cosmic magic. It operates right alongside the very practical realities of putting a humble fig poultice on a skin boil. But naturally, Hezekiah wants proof that this is really going to happen, that he really will go up to the temple. So Isaiah offers him a sign from the Lord. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of the mercy we're talking about here. To prove the promise, God makes the shadow cast by the sun on the stairway to the terrace of Ahaz go back exactly 10 steps. Contrast that with the humble fig poultice. You've got the mundane reality of medical figs on one hand, and the massive, mind-bending cosmic sign of the sun's shadow literally reversing its course on the other. It's wild. So that brings us right into Act 2, the reversal of tradition. Now we're moving from the Old Testament to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 12. If Hezekiah's story was about reversing a terminal fate, this story is all about the reversal of rigid tradition. Let's set the scene. Jesus is walking through a field of grain on the Sabbath, and his disciples, they're hungry. Now, what's really interesting here is the immediate conflict this sets up. On one side, you have the disciples. They are experiencing raw human hunger, so they just start picking heads of grain to eat. But on the other side, you have the Pharisees. They aren't looking at the hunger. They are looking strictly at the rule book. They see this and immediately declare, "See, your disciples are doing what is unlawful to do on the Sabbath." They're operating entirely on the mandates of tradition, completely unyielding to the physical suffering and need happening right in front of them.
Let's look at how Jesus actually builds his defense here. He doesn't just argue with them. He maps out historical, scriptural precedents to prove his point. First, he points back to David, who, when he and his companions were hungry, went straight into the house of God and ate the bread of offering, bread that was strictly only lawful for priests to eat. Second, he points to the law itself, noting that priests working in the temple on the Sabbath technically violate the Sabbath rest, yet the verdict is that they are totally innocent. Jesus is laying out a very clear legal defense for us. Historically, human need and divine service have always trumped sanctuary rules, and they do so without incurring guilt.
Then, Jesus escalates the argument significantly. He asserts his own authority over the very institutions the Pharisees are trying so fiercely to protect. He tells them flatly, something greater than the temple is here. That is an incredibly bold statement. The temple was the absolute center of rules, rituals, and law. By claiming something greater is present, he is entirely decentering their rigid traditions and placing the focus directly on the immediate, living reality of his ministry and his disciples' needs. So, the crucial point is captured right here in this next quote. Jesus tells the Pharisees, "If you knew what this meant, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned these innocent men." This is the starkly beautiful, defining climax that unites both of our source texts today. Whether it's Hezekiah crying out in his sickbed or the disciples picking grain because their stomachs are empty, God is consistently shown to value mercy over the strict execution of mandates and sacrifices. From all this, we can pull together a really clear definition of what divine mercy looks like in action. It's the principle that compassion and addressing human suffering hold a much higher authority than strict adherence to established rules, prophecies, or rituals. God's response to Hezekiah's bitter tears and Jesus' defense of his hungry disciples both perfectly illustrate this. In both cases, the rule, whether it was the decree "you will die" or the law "you cannot harvest on the Sabbath," bowed to the ultimate synthesis of human vulnerability and divine compassion. Jesus then finishes his defense with an absolute mic drop moment, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. He isn't just bending the rules for a quick snack. He's claiming total sovereignty over the rule itself. It's the ultimate triumph of compassionate authority over inflexible law. The law was made for the benefit of humanity, not to be a tool used to starve the innocent. As we wrap up this explainer, these texts leave us with a really powerful mirror to hold up to our own lives. When we encounter vulnerability, when we see raw human need or desperation, how do we react? Do we act like the Pharisees, prioritizing strict adherence to the rules and traditions we're comfortable with? Or do we act in the spirit of these divine narratives, prioritizing mercy, seeing the tears, acknowledging the hunger, and allowing compassion to overrule the mandate? It's a profound challenge, and it remains just as relevant today as it was in the times of Isaiah and Matthew. Thank you so much for joining me, and keep exploring.